InterVenn Biosciences, a biotech startup in South San Francisco, was founded in 2017 by my guest today, serial entrepreneur Aldo Carrascoso, and the renowned experts in the field of glycoproteomics, Dr. Carlito Labrilla and Dr. Carolyn Bertozzi. Now, utilizing artificial intelligence, the company has developed a first-of-its-kind glycoproteomics-based liquid biopsy solution to detect and diagnose cancers. The goal of InterVenn is to create a world where no one is blindsided by disease. I'm Jessie Chahal. Welcome to this edition of The Nation. On today's episode, I have with me in the studios the CEO of InterVenn Biosciences, Aldo Carrascoso, to talk about InterVenn Biosciences and how it is revolutionizing the fight against cancers. Aldo, welcome to The Nation and thanks for being with us. You're in sort of a hot seat right now, in a hot spot where you're really looking at the way data and research is done in the field of fighting cancer. But let's first talk about InterVenn. It was established here in Malaysia back in 2019, and since update us with its progress in terms of how it's contributing to Malaysia's performance in our overall cancer preparedness, and perhaps also from that, where do you see some of the gaps or the key weakness in our health system that can be further improved?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. We came to Malaysia, actually, my first trip was 5 years ago when I believe a representative reached out and said, you need to check out Malaysia. At that time, InterVenn was at its infancy, and we were looking for a regional hub. Basically, not just based in the United States, but based elsewhere, where I'm from as well, right? I am right now based in South San Francisco, but I was born and raised in Southeast Asia. What basically happened was I was blown away by the infrastructure in the country. So when I say infrastructure, there's a tremendous amount of government support for initiatives that we do. So that's a very important eye-opener for me, aside from the fact that there were also numerous experts in the fields of science that we needed, whether they're analytical chemists or some even biostatisticians. I was pleasantly surprised that the Malaysian population, of course, I didn't think otherwise, highly educated and highly skilled. So the government had great training programs. And I think one of the things that I'm very proud of is how we've returned a number of Malaysians that were practicing outside Malaysia now back into our lab over at...
You've helped with the brain drain solution as well there.
Well, I'd like to think that InterVenn, when we started this 5 years ago, and my first trip here was 5 years ago, we only incorporated the Malaysian entity in 2019. The vision has always been to promote global healthcare, right? So when I say no one gets blindsided by disease, the word is no one. It wasn't specific to a specific race or specific gender. My commitment to global health has always been front and center. And when I thought about my own family's experience in just cancer, it's not news that what prompted me to start this company was my mother succumbing to breast cancer in the 90s. And what really prompted me to start this in 2016 and 2017 was the experience my own family had again, yet with breast cancer. And when I looked at clinical trials or some of the solutions that were provided, and I realized that Southeast Asians, or actually most folks around the world, are underrepresented. So that's why I was looking for a hub outside the US also, so we could begin enrolling clinical trials. So I'm kind of now giving you an update of what we had.
Yeah. Based on the trials, what did you notice or decide that needed to be looked at differently in terms of data and how it was being done prior to InterVenn?
So it needed more representation from, something like a multi-site, multicultural, multi-ethnic design, rather than a very North American Caucasian-centric design. So we actually launched one of our first clinical trials here. And our partner was actually Clinical Research Malaysia, probably one of the best CROs / government agencies we've ever worked with. And they helped us launch to, correct me if I'm wrong, 14 different sites all around the country. And
so what's that landscape looking like now post the trials? What are you seeing in its data that reflect on status as Asians?
well, one of the things, and again, these are preliminary information.
Yeah.
Our trial is about to conclude, but preliminary information suggests something very interesting. Deep down inside, we're all the same glycoproteome, regardless of race.
Mm-hmm.
So what we've developed in the US, actually, so we refer to it as digital classifiers,
Okay.
how we classify disease states. We developed it in an almost 100% US-based population. We tried to apply that to a Southeast Asian population, namely Malaysian Chinese, Malaysian Indians, and Filipinos.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to successfully apply it. Did that surprise us? Actually, it was a pleasant surprise because, we found that the signatures were almost the same.
Okay, so what is that telling us for the future, and what is it that is being done differently in particular? If you could just indulge us a little bit in terms of the AI and what it's really doing in breaking down and identifying this data. As you said earlier, it was perhaps always there, this information, but at some point overlooked by scientists.
Yeah, so when I say it's always there, I think I'm referring to the science, which is the interrogation of the glycoproteome.
Mm-hmm. The interrogation.
Yes, we refer to it as the interrogation of the glycoproteome. So the glycoproteome has been around for over 130 years. I always say it's been hiding in plain sight. First implicated in disease by a Nobel laureate in 1890. Mm-hmm. Would you believe that?
I don't, but yes.
1890. When you think of genetics or genomics, that was the 1970s, 1980s.
Right.
Glycoproteomics predates that. Now, scientists have well accepted its implication in disease biology. So it's not, you don't have to refute that. We didn't invent the science, and scientists accept it. But also the same scientists will tell you scalable interrogation is impossible.
Why?
Why is it impossible? So just to give you a good comparison, 20,000 genes, 3 billion base pairs.
Mm.
Kind of easy to wrap your head around it, right? That's why you have the Human Genome Project over many, many years trying to sequence everything. Glycoproteoforms, we think that the median floor to ceiling is 10 to the 15 or 10 quadrillion.
Okay.
That's why scientists or anyone that was willing to even interrogate it over time gave up, because it was almost impossible. They had to manually and visually curate it over time. So let me give you an example. When you wanted to glycoprofile 100 people and look at, few 100,000 chromatograms,
Mm-hmm.
it would take 8 months.
Right.
100 people for 8 months. Can you imagine a clinical test? That wouldn't work.
Too much time, too much cost.
And by the way, I didn't even tell you, they were 7 PhDs doing it.
Mm.
You needed a PhD to go through the data.
And so now with AI and breakthrough technology, this information is more easily gained, and you're able to churn that data out as well. It's time for a quick breather, but when I come back, I will be in further discussion with the CEO of InterVenn Biosciences, Aldo, to talk about how InterVenn Biosciences is revolutionizing the fight against cancers. Welcome back. I'm seated with the CEO of InterVenn Biosciences, Aldo Carrascoso, to talk about how InterVenn Biosciences here in Malaysia as well is revolutionizing the fight against cancers with the help of technology and, of course, artificial intelligence. Aldo, before the break, we talked about your interest in global healthcare, and you said you were passionate about being at the front and center of it. But globally, where are the possible weaknesses that you have noticed or picked up in the way our healthcare systems are run?
First of all, I'm not a physician, nor do I play one on TV.
Yeah. Well noted.
But I think over the past 5 years, there is this huge push to screen earlier. The incidence of cancer actually in other diseases, of aging, they've actually gone much younger. So you will notice the incidence of cancer go from people that used to be 55, it's now down screening to 50. And now colorectal cancer, their advice is to go down to 45, right? So what's good is the awareness in early detection has been front and center. So you have a tremendous amount of companies that are racing towards screening solutions. That's wonderful. I think there's no but. There are many caveats.
Okay.
One of the things, I spent a lot of time with physicians, whether they're primary care physicians, women's health physicians, men's health physicians. And one of the most important perspectives that I got is when you screen an otherwise healthy person, what you don't want is to scare them unnecessarily, right? Which means your test needs to have extremely high and extremely reliable sensitivity and specificity, of course, very high accuracy. I think the race right now for a screening product for multiple companies right now, we may be ignoring the clinical actionability of some of these screening products.
Meaning to say?
Like, for example, there's this famous story of the gene mutation called BRCA1 and BRCA2. This was several years ago. When you screen for this gene mutation and you have the gene mutation, you are many more times likely to develop reproductive cancers as a female, whether that's ovarian cancer or breast cancer. So these are the BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes. The perfect example is Angelina Jolie, right? She was BRCA positive. There are many stories of families, childbearing young, getting BRCA1 and BRCA2 positive, and prophylactically having an oophorectomy or removing their ovaries, or even having a prophylactic mastectomy without any surety that they have cancer, right? And then there's actually a horror story, at least in the United States, of an entire family of women that elected to remove their breasts because of being positive of this. And then correct me if I'm wrong, to my recollection, a few years later, they were sent the results, and what seemed to be important variants of that gene mutation was no longer valid.
Okay, so help us understand this. How do we understand this occurrences? Because cancer could be part of our genome, or it could be part of our environment or our lifestyle. How are we making sense of this? And really, where does InterVenn?
It's called InterVenn because so we could intervene.
That's right.
That's a very loaded and complicated question. When you think of the different omics or modalities, genomics, that's looking at your genome or your blueprint. You've got transcriptomics, that's looking at how your blueprint starts to translate into proteins. That's your transcriptomics. You now also have, of course, proteomics, so finally it's a protein. But throughout that spectrum, you have different resolutions, right? When I say resolutions, let's say, for example, you have a leak in a building, right? And this leak in the building you need to fix. There are many ways you can do that, whether or not you want to look at just the blueprint, you want to look at just the building from the outside, or you want to enter the building. These different technologies complement each other. So we understand which part of the building is leaking, or sorry, first which building is leaking, now which part, and how to target that. Glycoproteomics is an extremely high resolution omics used to interrogate multiple cancers. So we can do, of course, colorectal cancer, not just for early detection, but also for pre-detection. So your adenomas, basically, those polyps that your gastroenterologist hope that they find. That's why they force you to screen using a colonoscopy when you're 50, regardless of anything else. Because they hope to find these polyps. Because what happens when they find the polyps? They cut it. And if they cut this successfully, you can manage colorectal cancer in perpetuity. Basically, it's not really it is a cure. That's why you will hear governments talk about early colorectal cancer screening programs. Now, when you look at the different modalities, right, there is this drive towards screening earlier.
Right.
So now the big problem is, how do I find these polyps? InterVenn has that technology to find them so that we can tell the physician to really force the person to go for a colonoscopy.
We're going to talk about exactly where InterVenn will be intervening and where you could find some of the services as well. I'm in discussion with the CEO of InterVenn Biosciences, Aldo Carrascoso. We're talking about how InterVenn Bioscience here in Malaysia especially is revolutionizing the fight against cancers. We'll be right back after these messages.
Program-program sempena sambutan Hari Kebangsaan dan Hari Malaysia 2022. Singing Community, Merdeka at Community, Infiesta Pentarama, Kembara Merdeka Keluarga Malaysia 2022, Skillbox Club Malaysiaku, Info on Wheels Merdeka, Kembara Media Merdeka, Program Semarak Gemilang 2022, Pameran Kenegaraan, Program Keceriaan Antara Kementerian, Adfluencer TikTok. Untuk maklumat lanjut, layari www.merdeka360.my. Keluarga Malaysia, teguh bersama.
Sekilas menyingkap berita di seluruh pelosok tanah air merentasi 13 negeri, 3 wilayah persekutuan. Sekilas memahami perihal yang berlaku dari sudut politik, ekonomi, sosial dan pelbagai lagi. Sekilas menyentuh segenap aspek yang bermanfaat dan mendahulukan anda. Semuanya dalam Malaysia Sekilas Pandang. Rangkuman berita utama sepanjang seminggu. Hanya di Bermana TV.
Hello, welcome back to The Nation. Still with me, Jessie, and I'm in conversation with the CEO of InterVenn Biosciences. We're talking about InterVenn Malaysia and its establishment here in the country since 2019. The company hopes and aims to contribute to Malaysia's performance in the overall cancer preparedness. We talked about global healthcare. We talked about InterVenn intervening and looking at data in a perhaps different perspective via AI and so on and so forth. But perhaps, Aldo, you can tell us a little bit more about InterVenn's work here in Malaysia currently.
Perfect. So actually we are launching our Asia Pacific research and development hub, which is, of course, our laboratory here with several mass specs located in Bukit Jalil.
Yep.
We're excited about that because I remember coming here and saying, we're eventually going to have a lab. So it's the centralized hub right now for all sample processing coming from Asia Pacific. So, we made a tremendous amount of investments in that infrastructure. What's really made us very proud, of course, and very humbled, is the support from government agencies and different non-government organizations, like not just in investments, but in partnerships. So we have a tremendous amount of collaborators right now that span multiple cancers, whether it's nasopharyngeal cancer with the NIH or with colorectal cancer over at USM. We've grown our partnerships here exponentially at this point. So we plan to invest more resources, more people. We also plan to cross-train. So some of the best data scientists, AI engineers, and neural net experts are actually here with me to cross-train some of the experts here on some of the next generation cutting-edge technologies that run our neural nets and our models. So that's what I'm excited about.
So InterVenn is, of course, involved in progressing research and the healthcare sort of system overall in that perspective as well. What more now in the next 6 months or next 1 year in terms of growth here in Malaysia?
So my big plan here is to make that research and development lab a commercial laboratory.
Made available for the masses?
Made available for Asia Pacific, actually. That's where the bulk, if not all, of Asia Pacific sample processing.
I'm sure viewers are like me at this point. We're wondering, well, Aldo, this is great. But what sort of cost are we looking at here?
We're always driving the cost down. And one very important attribute of just the technology or the science is it has many interesting attributes. Like we need, instead of like an entire tube of blood, we only need like 100 microliters. So it's much smaller. There are also many attributes. For example, if you take your blood sugar, you can actually have glycoproteins are very stable with the filter papers that can capture all of these things. What does that mean? There are many attributes to our business that will allow us to drive costs way down. I always tell people I did not start InterVenn only for wealthy and countries that can afford. Right? I started it so it can be a tool for global health. Not just that, I wanted it to be generally accessible. And one of the reasons why blood tests are not generally accessible is, of course, you need to go through a phlebotomist, you have to go through a lab, this has to be refrigerated, it has to be sent to a centralized laboratory.
Yep.
But once again, there are attributes to both glycoproteomics and the applications of the technology that may not need any of those. Just by the give, and that now allows us to go, my dream is to have someone from like Sabah, Sarawak send the sample via postage to our lab here in Bukit Jalil.
As a visionary and a serial entrepreneur, how soon do you see that happening? And meaning to say, what is the future of our healthcare system progressing or improving to a level that is so accessible?
Not soon enough is the answer. I think the world is headed towards even more higher prevalence and incidence of cancer, given, of course, many factors. You mentioned it during the first part of our conversation. Our first set of products have actually come out already. We launched a immunotherapy checkpoint inhibitor triaging tool a few weeks ago with very, very high uptake rate, so we're excited about that. We are releasing a advanced adenoma for colorectal cancer screening product next year.
It's exciting to me, and I'm sure that it is promising as well, and especially as a nation and as we progress into looking at finding solutions and cures and preventing diseases and illnesses. Aldo, thank you for your time, and it's been a pleasure speaking to you. I've been in conversation with the CEO of InterVenn Biosciences, Aldo Carrascoso, on how InterVenn Biosciences and its presence here in Malaysia is revolutionizing the fight against cancers. I'm Jessie Chahel. Thanks for being with me. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Pelan Tindakan Dasar Sekuriti Makanan Negara 2021 hingga 2025 bertujuan memperkukuh sekuriti makanan negara. Berikut langkah proaktif menangani isu bekalan harga makanan. Pelaksanaan stok simpanan ayam menerusi Lembaga Pertubuhan Peladang. Mempermudahkan proses pembayaran tuntutan subsidi harga ayam dan telur. Memudah cara prosedur import melalui penangguhan fee permit dan mewujudkan laluan pantas barangan makanan haiwan. Memperkasa pemasaran dan pasaran oleh persatuan nelayan. Mempergiat kempen makan ikan segar beku dan air tawar. Memperkukuh rantaian pengeluaran hasil pertanian komuniti. Menjadi